Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the third video in this series where we are building a notes application from scratch using Angular. In this video, we are going to be creating the note details page, which will allow the user to view and edit the note fields. So here we can see a demo of the note details page. This is what it will look like. So we have a input for the note title, and we have a text area for the note body. And below that we have the cancel and save buttons. The note details page will be used for when the user wants to add a new note. So in this case, here the user is creating a new note with the title of ABC and the body of this is a test. Okay? And the note details page will also be used for when the user wants to edit an existing note. The user can view the title and the body of existing notes by clicking on the note card, which then displays the note details component. The note title and the note body are populated into the input and the text area. The note details page allows the user to view all of the note content and also allows the user to edit the fields. Alright then, so let's get started building this note details page. Alright then, okay, so now let's go back to the code, and we want to go to the terminal here, and we want to generate a new component for the note details page. So let's type in ng-generate component pages / note details. Okay, press enter, and that will generate the component. Okay, so now that's here, and let's go to the template here, and we have this placeholder text here. Before we create this note details page, let's go to the routing module and set up the route for the note details component. So let's go here and let's put a comma here, and let's create a new root object and set the path to, so here we are going to set the path to a dynamic path using root parameters. So to do this, we can type in the colon and then type in the parameter name, and we'll call this ID, and the component will be the note details component. There we go, and that's all we have to do for now. So save this and close this, and let's go to our app, and now let's go to the browser address bar here and type in a ID. So since this is a dynamic route, we can put anything here. So for example, ABC, and that will then take us to the note detail component, and we could change this to 123, and that would also work. So this is a dynamic route where we can put any parameter here, and it will send us to the note details page. And this will then allow us to use the parameter to determine which node detail is being viewed and edited. So here is the UI design for the note details page, and we have a form here with a title input box and a text area for the body text, and then we have the cancel button and the save button here. So this page will define the layout and also contain this form. So let's start creating that. Let's go back to the code, and let's start creating the markup for this page. The first thing we want to do is create the form container. So the first thing that we want to do is create a div with the class of form container. Okay, and then within here we will have the form. Okay, so we create a form tag, and we can remove this action because we don't need it in Angular forms. And okay, and the first thing we want to do before we actually create the form elements, let's first import Angular forms. So let's go to app.module.ts, and let's go up here and let's type in import forms module from @angular/forms. There we go. And let's go down to the imports here and type in forms module. There we go. And save that, and that's all we have to do. And now that we've imported Angular Forms, Angular will automatically convert all form tags into Angular Forms. And we can get access to the Angular Forms object by creating a template variable here called noteForm. The name of the variable doesn't actually matter, so you can call it whatever you want, but noteForm seems like a sensible name, so that's good. And make that equal to ngForm. So what this is doing is it's setting the ngForm object that is automatically created by Angular because we imported the forms module, and it's setting that equal to a template reference variable that we are creating here that we've called noteForm. And now this means that we can use this variable in our template and also in our component class. So that's good. Inside the form, we can now create the form fields. So let's create a div with the class of field. And this is a BOMA class, which is used for form creation. And we can then put a label inside there with the class of label, which is also a BOMA class. And let's set the text of this label to title. And then let's create a div with the class of control, which is also a BOMA class. And inside this div, we can put in an input with the class of input, which has type text. Okay. And then we can go outside of this div and create another div with the class of field. And inside here, create the label. Get rid of the for. And inside here, we can type in body. And then create a div with the class of control, which contains a text area. And we don't need all of this. Okay, and here we can set the class to text area, which is a class provided by BOMA. Okay, and that's it. So save this now, and let's go to our app. And now we have the title and the body show up here, which is great. And they look very similar to the form elements that are in the UI mockup. But we have to obviously create the layout of this being a fixed width, because currently these are taking up 100% of the width. So let's go back to the code and let's go to the style sheet here, the note-details.component.scss, and let's create the class of form container. And let's just set the max width here to 500 pixels. Save that, and let's go back to the app. And now we have a maximum width of 500 pixels. Great. But we have to set the margin to auto so that the form is centered. And there we go. So now we have a centered form. That's great. And that looks very similar to the UI design here. There we go. So that looks pretty good. But we need some spacing here and also down below here. So let's add that spacing. So to put the spacing in between the title and body fields, we can put in a break here using the BR tag. So save this, and let's go back to the app. And now we have spacing in between these two fields. Great. And then we can go to the style sheet and set the margin top to 50 pixels. There we go. Save this, and let's go back to the app. And now we have lots of spacing up here and in between these fields. That's great. And it looks exactly the same as our UI design. That's great. The next thing that we have to do is add these two buttons. So let's do that now. Let's go to the template and let's add those buttons. Let's create a div with the class of field, which is a BOMA class, is grouped, which is also a class provided by BOMA, and is pulled right. These are all classes provided by BOMA, which are very useful when creating these buttons. So within this div, we can create a div with the class of control, which contains a button with the class of button and is text. And inside here, we can type in the text of the button, which will be cancel. And then we can copy and paste that control there and change this to save and change this to is primary. Okay, save this and go back to the app. And now we have cancel and we have save. And it looks very similar to the UI design. However, this has a green background and this has a purple one. So we actually have to change this from is primary to is success. Okay, save this and let's go back to the app. And now we have this green background. However, this still isn't the same as the UI design because the UI design has a lighter green, which looks a bit better. So the way that we can change this is by going back to the code and going to the main styles-SCSS and setting the green variable. So let's set this to hashtag 0b F387. Okay, and that is the nice green that we saw in the UI design. Okay, and save this now and go back to the app. And now this is using that nice green. And they're now the same. The reason that this worked was because BOMA internally uses the green variable when calculating the color of the isSuccess class. So that is why this worked. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, and we also have to do a few more things. So let's go to this cancel button here and set the type equal to button. And the save button here, let's set this to type submit. So when the save button is clicked, then the submit event will be fired for this Angular form. So that's good. So save this now, and the next thing we can do is add some validation. So we know that the title is required. So let's add the required attribute to this input. Okay. The good thing about Angular Forms is that it does a lot of the heavy lifting for us when it comes to validation. So because we added this required attribute here, Angular Forms will know that this input is required. So therefore this form will only be valid when this input has text in it. So that's very good. We will see how this works now. So let's go to this form here and let's listen to the ng submit event. So use event binding here with brackets and type in ng submit and make this equal to on submit, which is a method that we haven't created yet. Okay, and then pass in note form, which is this variable here, which contains the form object. Great, okay, so now let's save this and let's go to the component class and let's create that method on submit, and that will then take in the form as the parameter. So form, and this will be of type ng form, and this has to be imported from at Angular Forms, so up here. Okay, and then here let's just console log the form. Okay, save this and let's go back to our app, and let's go to the console, and let's go to the title, and let's type in test and click save. And now we get this ngForm object show up in the console. So let's open it up, and let's go to the value, and here we have an object, and currently this value object hasn't got anything inside it, and that's because I forgot to set up these fields. So this field has to have a name property and also a ng model. So let's add those now. So name is equal to title, and we have to also use ng model, and that is when we bind a value that is in the component class to a form element. Before we do that, let's first create a model for notes. So let's go to the app folder, and let's create a new folder called shared. And inside this shared folder, let's create a new file called note.model.ts. Okay, and let's type in export class note, and here let's have a public property called title, which is of type string, and let's create a public body which is also type string. There we go. That's all we have to do there. So save this now, and let's go back to the note details.component.html, and let's actually go first to the component class note-details.component.ts, and let's create a property here which is of type note model. So let's name this property note, and this will be of type note, which has to be imported from note.model up here. Okay, and then that is all we have to do there. And now let's save this and go back to the template, and let's use ng model now to bind to that. So using square brackets, type in ng model and make that equal to note.title. Okay, and let's do the same thing for the body. So let's go to the text area here, and let's set the name here to body, and let's set the ng model to note.body. There we go. Let's save this now, and let's go back to the app, and this should now work. So here this says cannot read property title of undefined, and that's because we haven't instantiated the note object in the component class. So this is undefined. That's why we are getting that error. So let's for now go to the ng on init method and say this.note is equal to new note. Okay, and save that now, and let's go back to the app, and now we don't get that error anymore. Great. So now let's go to the title, and let's just type in test, click save, and now we get the ngForm object here. Let's go into it, and let's go to the value, and this is an object, and it has a body property of undefined, and that is expected because we don't have any text here. But we do have a title property of test, and that's great because we typed in test here. So let's try and change this to test123 and click save, and we get this new ngForm here. So let's close this one, and let's open up this one and go to value, and now we have the title as test123. So that's great. Great. So the other interesting property here is the valid property. So let's click on it, and it says true. So this form is valid. So this means that this form passes all of the validation checks. So far, the only validation rule that we've put in place is that this title input has to have text in it because it's required. this field is required. So when we remove this text, then hopefully when we click save, this form will be invalid. So let's click save, and we have this new ng form object here. So let's close this one, and let's open up this one, and let's go to the value, and we have an object. So here we have the value object with an empty string and the body of undefined. And now let's go to the valid property here and click on it, and it's false. So that's good, because this hasn't got text in it and it is required, so therefore this form should be invalid. So that's very good. So that is how basic form validation works in Angular when using the required attribute. Alright then, okay, so we can see that this valid property is set to false, and that's good because this field here is required and it hasn't been filled in. So the form should be invalid. So that's good. So now the question is, how do we show this to the user? How do we tell the user that this form is invalid and what field is invalid, so that they can then make changes to then get the form in a valid state? So to do that, let's look at how to style the fields when they're invalid. So let's go to the Elements tab here, and let's look and inspect this input here. So we can see that it has some classes that have been added by Angular. So here we have the ng-invalid class that's been added, and we also have the ng-touched and the ng-dirty class here as well. These classes tell us which styles should be applied. These classes allow us to style this input for different validation states. So we will go back to the code now, and let's go to the style sheet that we have here, and let's create a style for ng-invalid, and let's set the background color to red. Alright then, save this now, and let's go back to the app, and now we can see that all of this is now red. That wasn't what we wanted to do. We only wanted the inputs to have this styling, not the whole form. So this isn't good, but let's see why this is happening. Let's go and inspect the form. So the form has these classes as well. It has the ng-invalid class being applied here. This is because the form is invalid, and therefore Angular Forms adds this class. So we have to go back to the code and be more specific here. So this should only apply to inputs and text areas. So let's type in input, comma, text area, and let's then nest this inside here and say and .ng-invalid, and then set the background color. So now the background color will only be set to red when the element is an input or a text area. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go back to the app, and now only this title input has a red background. The reason that this text area hasn't got the red background is because this hasn't got any validation rules. So this is perfectly valid, and the title is invalid because it is required and this doesn't currently have text in it. So that's good. However, this is a pretty bad style, so let's go back to the app code here, and let's change this to a border color red. There we go. Save this, and let's go back, and now we have this border as red, but we still have this box shadow here which is blue. So let's go back to the code, and let's change the box shadow to 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels, and 2 pixels spread, and this will be RGBA red, and then 0.1. There we go. So save that now, let's go back to the app, and now this looks a lot better. But let's make this box shadow only appear when this input has focus. So, and focus, there we go. Save that now, let's go back to the app, and when we focus it, then we have that that box shadow. So there we go, that is all good. That looks a lot better. However, we don't want to show this styling as soon as we show the form. We first want to give the user the opportunity to first set the title and set the body before showing these validation styles, because this can be quite intrusive and quite confusing to the user when there's a red border on an input that they haven't touched yet. So we can use the ngTouched class here to only show the validation styling when this input has been touched. So let's go back to the code here, and let's put ngTouched here as well. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go back to the app. And now we don't have that red border. And when we go and click into it, and then click out of it, then now we have this validation styling. So now this is a much better user experience. So that's great. Now let's look at how we can disable this save button when the form is invalid. So let's go back to the code here, and let's go to the template, and let's scroll down to the save button here, and let's use property binding with the square brackets on the disabled property, and set that equal to, and then here we will use the template variable note form. So note form dot valid, and then we will not this statement. So use the exclamation mark here, and now this says not note form dot valid. So this button will be disabled when the note form isn't valid. Okay, so save this now, and let's go back to the app. And now this button is now disabled. Great. And now let's go to the title, and let's click out of it. And there we go, that is still disabled. And let's go and set some content here to test. And now this button is enabled. Great, so that works. And now we have full validation on this simple form here. That's great. So the next thing that we're going to do is create the functionality of the save button. Okay then, so let's go back to the code, and let's go to the component class. So the next thing we have to do is we have to work on this onSubmit method. And here we don't want to console log the form, but we want to save the note. But before we do this, we first have to work out where we are going to store these notes. And the way that we're going to do this is by creating a service that stores the notes array and has methods to manage that notes array. So let's go to the terminal here, and let's create a new service. ngGenerate service, and this will go into the shared folder. So shared slash and then notes. Okay, press enter. Okay, and that's now created the notes service in the shared folder here. So let's go here, and the first thing we want to do is create the notes array. Okay, and note has to be imported from note.model. Okay, and save that now. That's good. And now we want to create some methods to manage the data that's inside the array. Let's first create the get method. So get, and then this will take in an ID, which will be of type number. And this ID will correspond to the index that the requested data is at in the array. So let's do return this.notes, and then use square brackets and pass in the ID. Okay, there we go. So this ID will act as the index of the note that the caller wants to retrieve. Okay, and now let's create the getID method, and this method will retrieve the ID of a note object. So this will require a note to be passed in. Okay, and we then want to return this.notes.index of, and then pass in the note. Okay, great. Okay, the next one we want to add is the add method. and this will take in a note. So this method will add a note to the notes array and return the ID of the note, where the ID is equal to index. Let new length is equal to this.notes.push, and here we can see that this push method takes in the items to push, and it then returns the new length of the array. So this push method is really handy because it then returns the new length of the array. So we can then pass in the note, there we go, and we can then let the index equal to new length minus 1, because array indexes start at 0, so therefore we have to subtract 1, and then we will return index. There we go. Okay, so the next method we want to create is the update method, and this will take in the ID, which is of type number, and it will then take in the title and the body, which are both strings. Okay, so let no equal to this.notes and pass in the ID as the index. And now we have the specific note that we have to update. And now we want to change the note and the title. So note.title is equal to title, and note.body is equal to body. There we go. And that's all we have to do there. So save that. And let's add the last one, which is delete. And this will take in the ID. Okay. And for this, we have to do this.notes.splice, and this will remove an element from an array. Okay, and we have to pass in the start index, which will be the ID, and the delete count, which will be 1. Okay, there we go, and that's all we have to do for that. So save this now. Alright then, okay, so we've now completed this note service, so let's close it, and let's go back to the note-details.component.ts, and now let's save the note. So we first have to actually get this service via dependency injection. So let's go to the constructor and type in private notes service, which is of type note service, and that's to be imported from source/app/shared/notes.service. Okay. And now we can go down here to the onSubmit method and now do this.noteService.add form.value. There we go. Save this now. And now let's go to the notes list component, which currently we have hard coded these note cards here, but we want to dynamically load these and retrieve the notes from the service. So let's go to the component class here, and let's go to the top here, and let's create a notes property, a new array of type note. There we go, and this has to be imported. So let's import that note model. And we actually forgot to create one method in the note service. So let's go to the note service again, and let's create a method at the top here called getAll, and this will return this.notes. Okay, there we go. Let's close this and let's go back to the noteslist.component.ts, and let's go to the ng-on-init method, and here we want to retrieve all notes from note service. But first we have to inject it. So let's go to the constructor and let's type in private notes service, which is of type note service, and that's to be imported as well from up here. Okay, and let's go to the ng-on-init method and let's do this.noteService.getAll. Okay, and this will return all the notes. So let's say this.notes is equal to this.noteservice.getAll. Okay, there we go. So now let's save this now, and let's go back to the app, and let's see if this works. So let's first go back to the notes list page. Okay. Oh, and we haven't actually changed the template. So let's go back to the code and let's go to the template, and let's remove these, and let's just use this one here, and let's type in ng4 and set that equal to let note of notes, and let's set the title to note.title, and let's set the body to note.body. Note.body. Okay, so there we go. So save this now, and let's go back to the app, and let's see what happens. Okay, so we don't have those cards showing up. That's good, because we don't have any notes yet in the service. So let's go to the new note page. However, we don't have any button that takes us there. So let's first go back to the code and let's quickly create that button. Let's go down here and let's create a button which has a class of button, which is a BOMA class, and also floating add button, which is a custom class that we will be creating, and also is primary, which is a BOMA class as well. So let's save that now, and let's go back to the app, and we have this now here. Let's set the text of the button to plus add. Okay, save that now, and now we have plus add. Great. Okay, and let's go back to the code, and let's go to the style sheet, and let's create the class floating add button. Okay, and here we will be setting this to position fixed and setting the bottom to 0 so that this button will stick to the bottom, and set the width to 500 pixels and set the border radius to 0, and also set the box shadow to 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 15 pixels, 5 pixels, and then the color will be RGBA, and using the purple variable 0.2 opacity. Okay, there we go. Let's go to the top and make sure that we are importing main styles, main-styles.css. There we go. We have to do that so that we get access to this purple variable. Okay, save this now, and let's go back to the app. And now we have this add button show up here. That's great. Let's add a few more things though. Let's set the height to 68 pixels. 68 pixels. And let's set the font size to 24 pixels. Okay, great. So save this now, and let's go back to the app. And now we have this nice button here. That's great. So now let's go back to the style sheet here. And let's go up to the notes list, and let's set the margin bottom to 70 pixels. And the reason that we have to do this is because we now have this floating add button here, which has the position of fixed. So without this, this floating add button would overlap the content that is in the notes list. So therefore, we have to create a margin bottom to make sure that all of the notes are still visible, even when we have this floating add button. Okay, so save this now, and let's go back to the app, and that looks great. Let's go back to the code here, and let's go to the template, and let's set a router link, and let's make this go to new. Okay, save this now, and let's go back to the app. So click this, and now we have been taken to the /new root, and we can now see the note details here. Great, okay. So now let's try and add a new note. So let's say new note here, and let's say this is a test, and let's save this. Okay, and nothing happens. That's because we aren't redirecting to the main notes list page when we click save. So let's go back to the code and let's do that. Let's go to the note details component class and let's go to the onSubmit method, and let's first of all go to the constructor and let's inject the router. So private router, which is of type router, and that's be imported from @AngularCore. Okay, and let's scroll down now and let's go to the onSubmit method and let's do this dot router dot navigate by URL, and let's just pass in slash. Okay, and let's save this now and let's go back to the app, and now let's type in testing and testing 1 2 3, and let's click save, and now we are taken back to the notes list page, which is at the slash root here. Great. However, we have a problem. That's because we have note.title and note.body showing up here. The literal note.title and the literal note.body. So let's go and fix this. Let's go back to the template for notes list, and let's change this so that we have square brackets here, because we want to use the property note.title and note.body, not the literal string note.title and note.body. So save this now and let's go back to the app, and now let's click on add and let's try this again. Let's click save, and now we have the correct title and body showing up here. That's great. So that works perfectly. Let's try and add one more. Let's go here and let's say 1 2 3 4 5 and A B C D E. Let's click save, and now we have 2. That's great. Let's try and add one more, third. Click save, and now we have the third one showing up here, and we have a scroll bar show up here, and also this add button doesn't overlap because we have added the margin bottom of 70 pixels. That's great. So that works perfectly. Great. One thing that we do have to do though is create the cancel mechanism, because currently when we click cancel then nothing happens. So let's go to the code and let's go to the note details component class, and let's create the cancel method. And what will happen when we cancel is we just want to navigate back to the main notes list page. So to do this, we'll do this .router.navigate by URL and then pass in slash like we did here. Okay, so save this now and let's go to the template of note details and let's go to the cancel button here and let's set a click event. So click and then type in cancel. Okay, great. So save this now and let's go back to the app, and now let's click cancel, and now we are taken back to the notes list page. Great. So let's try and add a new note, and let's try and click cancel, and that all works. Great. Alright then, okay, so the next thing that we have to do is we have to create the functionality to click on these notes and then have the ability to edit the fields. So let's do that now. Let's go to the code and let's first of all go to the routing module, and let's create a new path. Okay, so currently we just have a path which takes an ID, and it then sends us to the component note details component. But we want a path that is /new, which also takes us to the note details component. Let's save this and let's close this, and let's go to the note details component class, and let's go to ng-on-init, and here we want to find out if we are creating a new note or editing an existing one. So to do that, we have to look at the root. So let's go to the constructor and let's first of all inject the activated root. So private root, which is of type activated root, which has to be imported from @Angular/router. Okay, and we want to then check the root parameters. So let's first of all do this.root.params.subscribe, so that we subscribe to the parameter changes, and pass in an observer which will take in the params, which is of type params, which have to be imported from @angular/router up here. Okay, and we then want to create an if statement that checks whether or not params.id has a value, and if so, then this.note is equal to this.noteService.get, and we will then pass in the ID params.id. And also, we want to create a new property here called noteID, which is of type number, which will store the ID of the note that we are currently editing. So this.noteID is equal to params.id. Okay, and then let's also create a boolean called new, which stores whether or not this note detail component is editing or creating a new note. So let's set this.new here to false, because we aren't creating a new note, but we are actually editing the note. Okay, and let's create the else statement here, and let's set this.new to true. Alright then, okay, so that's all we have to do for now. Let's save this, and now let's go to the onSubmit method, and let's put an if statement here. If this.new, then we should save the note. So let's grab this code here and move it up here. And then else, we should update the note. So this.noteService.update, and then pass in the ID, which is stored at this.noteID, and then pass in the title and the body. So this.form.value.title and this.form.value.body. There we go. Okay, and we don't need this here, so it's just form.value and form.value here as well. So there we go, that should now work. Let's save this, and now let's go to the notes list component.html, and we want to go to the app note card. So here we want to link these app note cards to the route for editing that note. So the first thing we want to do is split this up onto multiple lines, just so it looks a bit cleaner. Okay, there we go. And the next thing we want to do is work out some sort of way of retrieving the ID for this note that is in the current iteration of this ng for loop. One way to do this is by using the inbuilt index that ng4 provides us. So let's put a semicolon there, and let's say index as I. Okay, so now the variable I will store the index of the current iteration of this ng4. Great, so now we can add a router link and set this to I, so that this will take us to /I. Great, so let's save this now, and let's go to the app, and let's first of all let's add a new note, and let's try and click on this, and that now takes us to /I. But this is the literal string I, not the index, and that's actually because I made a mistake here, and this has to be encapsulated in square brackets. So there we go, and now this should now work. So save this, and let's go back to the app. Okay, and let's go back to the main root, and let's click add, and let's add a new note with title testing. Let's click save, and now we have this note here. Let's click on this note, and this now takes us to /0. That's great. So that's working perfectly because the index of that note was 0, because we only have one element, and arrays start at 0, so therefore it has an ID of 0. So that works great. Now we have to go back to the code and we have to do something with that variable in the note details component. So let's go to the component class for note details, and now let's go here, and we are doing this.note is equal to this.noteService.get, so that should work, but we aren't actually initializing the note before we do this. So let's grab this piece of code here and let's move it up here. Okay, and let's save that now, and hopefully this should now work. Let's go back to the main root. Let's click on the add button. Let's add a new note. Click save. And now let's click on ABC. And now we get the title ABC Sharp here. Great, so now that's working really well because we now have the title and the body populated with the correct data. But one thing that I want to do is quickly check whether or not this is being populated properly, because we can't tell because this note hasn't got a body. So let's type something in here. This is a test 1 2 3. Let's click save. Okay, and this save button isn't redirecting us back to the main root. So let's go back to the code and let's see why that is. Oh, okay, so it's because we have to put this line of code here outside of this if-else statement. So now this should work. So save this and let's go back to the app. And let's first of all go to the main root. Let's click on add. And now let's try and put in a title and a body. This is a test. Let's click save. And now we have the title and the body show up here. That's good. Let's click on it. And now we have both the title and the body properly populated. So that's good. This is now working great. Let's try and change something here. 1 2 3, and let's click save and let's see if the save works. Great, that's really good. And let's see if the cancel button works. Great, so that works as well. Let's try and change this and let's click cancel, and let's make sure that this hasn't been saved. So click cancel, and there we go, that works as well because now this has remained as 1 2 3 and hasn't updated. Great, so now that's working, and we have full update functionality. The next thing we have to do is create the functionality to delete notes using this button here. And currently we have a major design flaw, and that is that when we click on this delete button, it sends us to the update page. And that's because we have set the router link on the whole component. So we have to find a way to somehow differentiate between this part of the card here and the delete button here. And to do this, we actually have to go to the component itself. So let's go to the note card component, and we can see that we have a div here, which is the container, and we have the card content and the X button. So we want to differentiate between when the user clicks on the card content and when the user clicks on the X button. So let's implement this now. Let's first of all create an A tag, and let's remove the href, and let's make this encapsulate all of this note card content. Okay, there we go. So now this A tag is encapsulating the div with the class of note card content, and that's great. And now we want to add a router link to this A tag. Okay, and we want this router link to be set as whatever the parent component wants it to be set as. This means that we have to allow the parent component to input a string for the router link. So the first thing we have to do is go to the component class of note card and create an input here, like we did for the title and body, and set this equal to link, and this will be a string. Okay, and let's save this now and let's go back to the template and let's set this to link. There we go. Okay, and let's go to the notes list template, and let's not use router link, but let's instead type in link. Great. So save this now, and now let's go back to the app and hopefully this will work. So the first thing we have to do is create a new note. Okay, and let's try and click on this, and it takes us to the correct route. That's good, so that's working exactly like it was before. Great, let's click cancel, and let's try and click on this delete button, and hopefully this won't redirect us. There we go, so this isn't redirecting us to the edit page. That's really good. But when we press on the white part of this card, it then redirects us to this page. There we go, so that's working really well. Let's go back to the code, and let's do a similar thing for the delete button. Let's go to the note card component again, and let's go to the X button, and this time we won't be using router link, but we will be using a click event. So when the X button has been clicked, we want to call the on X button click method. Okay, so let's go to the component class, and let's create that method, on X button click, and then here we want to inform the parent component that the X button has been clicked, and from that point then the parent component can decide what to do. So to do this we need to use an event emitter. So let's go back up to the top here, and let's use the @output decorator, which has to be imported from @Angular core, and then we have to create the event emitter here. So let's call this delete event, and let's set this as a type of event emitter, which has to be imported from @Angular core, and the type will be void because we won't be passing any data, and this will be a new event emitter. So there we go. Let's save this now, and let's now go to the on X button click method, and here we simply want to do this.delete event.omit, and that's it. So save that now, and one last thing that I want to do is go to the output here and pass in a string, which is delete. This just means that the parent component will use this word here to bind to the event and not have to use the whole delete event name. So let's save this now, and let's go to the parent component, which is notes list. Let's go to the template, notes list template, and now let's go here and let's bind to the delete event. Okay, and we will call delete note, and pass in the index. Okay, so save that now, and let's go to the component class of the notes list, and let's create that method, delete note, and it will take in the index. Let's call this ID, which is of type number, and then we want to do this.note service dot delete, and then pass in the ID, and there we go. Save that. Okay, and now let's go to the app and let's see if this works. So let's create a new note, and let's try and click on this delete button, and there we go. So that actually worked, and the note was deleted. Let's add one more, and let's delete it. Great, okay, so that works now. And now we have full CRUD functionality, creating, reading, updating, and deleting. So that's really good. So we've just updated, and we can delete, and that all works. The next thing we want to do is we want to animate the note cards, like you can see in this demo. Alright then, let's get started implementing these animations.